Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Today's guest, Seabass of WNWS in Jackson, Tennessee. This episode presented by The Well Coffee House, which turns coffee to water. The Well is a coffee house with the mission to bring clean water to the world. Over 30 communities across the globe now have access to safe water, health, and hope because of The Well's work. You can also make a difference by visiting a Well Coffee House today. There are 5 locations in the Nashville area: Brentwood, Green Hills, downtown, Bellevue, and Cool Springs Lifeway. More information can be found at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. We also thank our co-sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. Today's news presented by Sutherland & Belk, a local injury law firm committed to helping those who've been injured in an accident. If you or someone you know has been hurt in a wreck or other accident, reach out to Sutherland & Belk. See what your rights are. You can find their contact info online at sbinjurylaw.com. Well, Vanderbilt starts fall camp on Thursday, August 1st. It'll have a media day. We will have you covered with all that at vandysports.com. First 3 practices are not open, but there will be 3 open practices for a small portion the following week. Today's guest line, presented by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on their sheets for years. They're amazing. I had no clue how comfortable sheets could be until I got Boll & Branch sheets. They are fair trade certified, so they are made under safe conditions by men and women, treated and paid fairly. Try them free for a month. You can return them if you want within that time period, but you're not going to want to. Once you get the sheets, get the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That is spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code Vandy. Get $50 off your first set of sheets. Seabass joins us today. He is from WNWS of Jackson, Tennessee. My friend and I were talking a lot about the trade deadline in Major League Baseball, which had some Vandy ties to it today. And on top of that, it's the start of fall camp tomorrow. So we've gone quickly from the uneventful to a time where it's about to come on us, my friend.
And as a sports talk show host, that is a good thing. That is a very good thing, my friend. Yeah, I'm so excited, man. Tomorrow's a big day. Tomorrow we start getting it on. The only thing I'm a little sad about, and it's certainly, was addressed on the board, and that's certainly no fault of yours, sounds like the access is going to be a skosh limited in the camp this year.
Yeah, I'll get to that in just a second. Just circling back on baseball, people didn't hear Tony Kemp was traded to the Cubs today, which was one of the teams that immediately came to mind as a team where he fit really well. He kind of fits that Ben Zobrist role where he can play in the infield, play in the outfield, hit a little bit, steal a base, that kind of thing. So I was happy for Tony. But let me ask you a question. Do you get any Is the deadline, the trade deadline, does that get any play in Jackson when you go on the air today? We're doing this Wednesday afternoon. I probably will not put this out till Thursday, but I'm just curious what that's like in your market.
It won't much because whereas you live in a Brave market, this is absolutely Cardinals territory. And so because they weren't overly active, not as much. We have some Braves fans who will definitely want to talk about bringing in Melantis and helping the pen and the rotation, but probably not too much now.
I'm surprised that's a Cardinals area. That must be a throwback to the 50s and the 60s because you had the Braves on WTBS in the 80s, and that just kind of became the South's team just due to that.
Oh, well, unfortunately, I've heard this so many times, and it's made me anti-Cardinal fan, to be honest with you. But most of ours will tell you that they grew up listening to KMOX and that they are lifelong Cardinal fans because of it. Yeah, it's probably about 85% Cardinal fans here.
Yeah, that was one of those stations that in Nashville you could get that. You could hear the Braves on the radio. You could hear Cincinnati, maybe Cleveland. I can't remember, maybe Detroit, but there weren't that many teams, but that was always one of them that you could hear.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and like I said, they'll tell stories about how they listened to it with their dad and their grandparents and all this other stuff, and that it just kind of cemented that. So yeah, by far Redbird country.
Well, I'm guessing your audience is ready for the start of fall camp at whatever school your audience supports, which I think is probably majority Tennessee with some Ole Miss mixed in, but I think that'll be probably filling the airwaves of your station in the coming weeks. Of course, it will dominate talk on our site. So a lot to talk about tomorrow. I really realized the last couple of days as I was putting together some previews for what to watch in fall camp, there really is a ton up in the air. I think that this would have been the most interesting fall camp that I've ever covered. I mean, I say would have covered. I will still cover it. But yes, we don't get to see anything the first 3 days. There will be a media day tomorrow. I will attend that, ask some questions, get whatever weekend up on video, maybe come with a notebook if it's enough stuff to make it notebook worthy. And then next week, we will get to see practices 4, 5, and 6 and get about 20 minutes of access each time. So, yeah, I really regret this because I feel like I get so much out of going to that. That's not news if you've listened to this podcast, but I just think there's so many players to evaluate that I'd like to look at this year that, I don't know, of all the camps that I wish this hadn't happened, this is pretty close to the top of the list.
Yeah, there's no question. And of course, we're all starving for information, especially because, golly, Bill, Chris, there's so, as you said it just now, and it was aptly put, so much up in the air. Golly, Bill, I mean, of all the times to have access, this would be it. I mean, there's so many things I want to know, man, that, and like you said, you're going to get some access, but how many questions we'll have answered between now and what are we, 31 days, I think, away from kickoff that we're just probably not going to get. And then we're not going to know until they take the field.
I was thinking about this today. In terms of the first team, in terms of picking the player in the exact position at where he starts, I'm thinking of things that, barring an injury or something strange happening, basically guys in spots that are guaranteed. And this is what I've got. And you tell me where you disagree or whether you think I've left something out. This is what I think is basically guaranteed. I think Keyshawn Vaughn will start at running back. Kalijah Lipscomb will get one of the receiving slots. Pinckney will start at tight end. Devin Cochran will start at left tackle. I think that is about it. Now, there's some other guys that I think will start, like particularly Sage Young. I'm shocked if he does not start. Maybe not shocked, but pretty surprised if he does not start on the offensive line. It's just the question is that left guard, which is where I think he'll be? Is that right guard? Cole Clemens, I think, will start. But will that be at right guard? Will that be at right tackle? So I think there's, on offense, there's 4 players that I think you can kind of lock in the starter in the position. And other than that, there's some stuff up in the air, man.
And it's funny because for one position, that's kind of cool. And that's the wide receiving position because there's so many what seems to be very acceptable options. So it's kind of hard to put them in an order right now, but that it's from a pool of about 4 or 5, even though we don't know exactly who it's going to be and what the depth chart looks like. They're all options that you feel like you could plug in right now and get some good results for. Conversely, the same situation might be on the offensive line, but I mean, the thing about the offensive line, because that could be the real swing here, because I mean, if things work out, this should be a good football team. But we can't even adequately piece together a starting offensive line, much less talk about our 2 deep. And at best, that's concerning.
Yeah, the offensive line is far and away the biggest question. I think the other storyline, again, is which of the receivers sees playing time. But I feel like whichever guys do that, they're going to have at a minimum 4 or 5 pretty good wide receivers that you can go to battle with in SEC play, and probably more like 6 or who knows, maybe 7. I mean, Lipscomb, Bowler, Johnson, Amir Abdur-Rahman, Justice Shelton Mosley, I think you had to assume, and Chris Pierce in his own way. They really like Chris, and he is a possession guy. So that's 6 guys that you feel okay about. They like Bostic. I just don't know. He never seems to stay healthy, and I just don't see him being nearly talented enough from what I've seen to pass those other guys. So putting receiver aside, okay, Cochran's going to play left tackle. Again, Sage Young's going to start. I think they want Grant Miller to win center. I mean, I say that. I don't know that that's entirely the way I meant to say it, but I think Grant Miller seems to be the favorite to win center is a better way to put it. But Dan Dawkins, who knows, could push him. You never know what Sean McMoore is going to do. He always seems to be in the mix, but never winning a job. He could fit at center, probably more likely at right guard. Again, I think a question is what they do with Clemens. Does he play right tackle? Or do they let Steen go at right tackle, which he's shown some things, and move Clemens inside where he played guard last year, although that was mostly, I think, on the left side. And you have Rowan Godwin, who didn't, according to Pro Football Focus, score super well at South Alabama, which makes me skeptical as to what he can do in the SEC, but I have seen him projected by some in the media as a starter. I don't know that I buy it. But who knows? So there's a lot of variables there. And then Jonathan Stewart, who's got ability, got 1 snap last year because he was out of shape. You keep hearing some things that he's made a move, but you don't know till you see it. That's a lot of variables. As I talk through it, it's just, I think it's concerning. Not that people weren't concerned anyway, but you've got to develop some continuity. And not just the fact that we don't know who the 5 are. We don't know exactly where they're going to line up. I think that is, again, that is why, to me, offensive line is number one concern going into the year.
Oh, no doubt. And, of course, I think we need to throw Bryce Bailey's name in there, too.
Oh, yeah, that was not on purpose. He kind of slipped my mind because he didn't play in the spring. But, yeah, Bryce Bailey will be a factor in there somewhere, too. And gives him, I think he can be a jumbo tight end, too. But, yes, I did not mean to leave him out.
No problem. Run back to the receivers for just a second. Let me ask you this. We do have the 4-game rule now for freshmen, so that's awesome. So you could probably possibly see it. But do you think because we got 2 pretty interesting true freshmen in Jaden Harrison and Devin Body Jr., who are pretty explosive athletes, but could this be one of those situations where it may be hard. It may be hard finding time for them, even if it's just in those 4 games, with perceived depth that they already have. Unless they just come in and one of them comes in and absolutely just destroys the fall camp.
I've covered this since 2003. This will be the hardest roster to come in and play on as a wide receiver. And I say play because a team always needs a 4th, 5th, 6th receiver. I just don't see openings there. Unless somebody gets hurt or suspended or something like that, I just don't see room unless one of these kids is, and not that we don't think they're good, but they would have to be pretty flat out phenomenal. Now, I think what you could see, say late in the year, if you got some guys banged up, maybe in that ETSU game, someone gets some snaps. And don't forget, Javian Marlowe's there too, and he's also seen some time in the slot. I just think it would be one of the biggest surprises that I have seen if one of those guys, and it's not a knock on them, but if one of those guys gets meaningful playing time other than just the sample snaps you can get and keep your red shirt, I would be shocked.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's the way that it shakes out. So, yeah, I mean, so far I think you've had it all right.
Defense, I think it is even more up in the air than offense. I think that Dio Odingbo starts at an end. Drew Birchmeyer probably starts on the line and maybe Tid too, but Odingbo is the only one that I'm sure about, although I'm pretty close on Birchmeyer too. It just, to me, is not having seen the Maddox and Zen Turner kids behind them yet, that makes me hedge my bet a little bit. But I would say, to be safe, Odingbo is the only guy that I think is etched in stone as starter.
Yeah, that's probably right.
I think at linebacker, I think Dimitri Moore on the inside is probably the only guy there too. I think Orji will end up starting, but you never know. I want to see if Colin Anderson is healthy, and I think he is, if he can make a move because he's flashed at times. But I think, to me, Moore is the only guy that is guaranteed a job of the four linebackers. No, Kenny Abair, Caleb Piard, I think probably are the starters penciled in, but neither of those guys has been world beaters, and they had Owusu got some PT, and you got Elijah McAllister, who I don't really know what he is. I just know he's an intriguing athlete. And you got LaShawn Polino-Bell coming in too. So that's another one where I just don't see. I think the four guys, if I'm picking, are Abair, Moore, Orgy, and Piart, but Moore's the only guy that I'm certain about.
Yeah, he's really started to come on. What would really help out a lot is if we could get a guy like, I don't know, like a Owusu to realize some of that potential that we saw coming out of Cali. And with all that length, it would sure be nice to get something out of him this year. Another guy who was lightly recruited, but he's had his fair share of playing time, and is Braden DeVault Smith.
Yeah, DeVault Smith has gotten a lot of reps in fall and spring. See, this is what makes this interesting. I just think their last couple of fall and August camps, they have rolled so many guys through. Like, you go one day and one guy's starting inside, and the next day it's another guy. And I was, one of the biggest surprises that I saw last year was based on what we saw in camp. Now, again, they cut us off 2 weeks early. And so maybe that's where things changed. But based on the way the reps went down, I thought they were going to sub really heavily inside. And they shocked me because at the end of the year, Griffin rarely came off the field. A lot of and really more from game 3 on or whatever it was, almost never came off the field. I mean, Moore ended up second team in snaps. If there was one spot on the field last year where I thought that they would rotate heavily, it would have been inside linebacker, and maybe that was complicated by Anderson not being healthy. But that was one thing. Like I said, I usually get a pretty good idea. If I get enough camp, I feel like I have a really good idea of what is coming next. That is one where I just was totally wrong.
Well, there's a name, though. What does 2019 hold for Anderson? Can he be healthy? Is he healthy going into camp? Because I think he has a chance to be a pretty nice player, but he just hasn't been able to stay healthy.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that in the middle game, in the opener last year, which he started, I thought he did some nice things. I thought he did nice things in practice. I had almost written him off just because it seems like for a couple of years he just has always been off the field more than on it in terms of fall camp and such. I saw him a good bit in spring, but you see this happen with guys who just take a beating sometimes, and they're just, after they're not on the field for a couple of years, you kind of start to write them off. I don't think that's going to be the case with him. From what I'm hearing, I think he is going to be more in the mix and probably more ready to go health-wise.
Well, if that's the case, that certainly helps out because, we talk about the positions of concern. I mean, the more you talk about it, the more it sounds like it's linebacker, Chris. Doesn't it? I mean,
well, I don't, my thing is, I've said all along, I think this is the position group that I'm the most bullish on. Maybe it's because they got a lot of options. I could still see Kenny Abair in the right spot becoming a pass rusher who can help them. I don't know what Polino Ball is, but I know he was good enough to get a scholarship at Michigan State. I like Elijah McAllister's athletic ability. Now, how that translates to being a football player, I don't know, but he's an intriguing-looking athlete. I like Orgy inside. I just feel like physically, in the way he produced in high school at a high level, I feel like he's going to pan out. There's some real wild cards there. I just have a feeling that might be the position group. The end of the year, we look back and say, hey, these guys really progressed from the opener to the end of the year. Maybe I'm not basing that off enough information. Maybe I'm basing that too much on what I thought of some of these kids coming out of high school. But that's kind of been my stance for a while, and I guess I'll stick with it going into camp.
The only thing is, because that was an interesting choice of words, this is the hill you really want to die on. I mean, bullish about this. I mean, because it sounds like the only bullish person that you're bullish on is is Dimitri Moore, which would be understandable. You talk about potential, but some of them guys, as you said, you haven't even seen yet. So, I mean, we can be bullish if we want to, but I mean, I'm not really sure bullish on what.
Okay, I think I'm bullish on Orgy. I just feel like physically he looks like he can play in the league. It does bother me a little bit he didn't play more. I think it's like this. It's like pouring these guys into the funnel. You don't know how many are going to come out the bottom, but I feel like they've got enough bodies to pour into the funnel at the top that some of them are going to hit. Again, I don't know. The whole defense is kind of that way. I can't sit here and tell you this guy's going to be the guy, but I can look at a lot of these groups and say, okay, they go 2 deep here or 3 deep here, guys where the battles are competitive. I don't know if that means they all stink or if that means back to the funnel that if they've got enough decent players, some of them are going to materialize. Again, that's why I just think this camp is so interesting because the odds are if I go and watch a ton, some of these guys will have taken that next step. I just want to see which ones they are.
Right. Well, look, Coach Mason is a big guy on length. He likes that, and I do too. Of course, theoretically everybody would, but some people specialize in that. And one guy that you mentioned that I am interested in because, and I look, admittedly, I only saw him a little bit in the spring, being out of town, but I would say that Elijah McAllister is very intriguing because just watching it, he had the type of length that you're looking for, and it looked like he had at least potential to flash a skill set that not everybody on that unit has.
He is so long that coming off the edge, if he gets his hands up, he makes it harder to get a throw off, and he's one of these guys that if a quarterback is kind of ducking out of the way or stepping up in the pocket to avoid an edge rusher, his arms are so long that he's got a chance to grab your jersey, and he's got a little more reach there than most of the guys that come bearing down on a quarterback do. Again, I don't know how it translates. He sure saw the field a lot in the spring. To me, he's a total wild card. Maybe 2 years from now, we're sitting here talking about this kid as a potential LSEC guy. Maybe 2 years from now, we're not talking about him because he was just an athlete where it never translated. But he's a guy that I'm anxious to see for those reasons.
And I mean, is he in 2 years? We talking about Stephen Weatherly, the next Stephen Weatherly? I don't know. I mean, maybe. That's one of the things I like about now. Weatherly had that super fast first step, but he had length too. That's the reason that I used that comparison. But I look, and another guy now, I don't really know just exactly how they plan on using him, and maybe it's strictly at safety. I'm not sure. But just like his brother, Anthony Orgy is physically ready. He would have been physically ready to play 2 years ago. I mean, I don't know. The genetics in that family are unreal because the little brother looks like the best of them. But they are absolutely shredded. And I tell you what, man, he was my favorite film to watch from last year's class. I loved watching Anthony Orgy's film, man. He just popped. They say that when you're scouting a player, if you don't know immediately by watching a game who it is you're supposed to be watching, and with obvious exceptions, like if you're watching IMG or something like that, then he's probably not the guy. But, Anthony sticks out to me. He's a guy that, if the playbook comes together for him and the instincts kick in from a physicality standpoint, he's beyond ready to contribute right now.
Let me ask you this, though. Last year, that defensive back class that came in was one of the best we'd seen in a while. They had Trey Douglas, who had offers from darn near everybody. They had Deshaun Jerkins, who a lot of people liked. They had Brendan Harris, who had been a Rivals 250 recruit. Max Worship was pretty highly regarded. They had some guys that normally are a cut above what Vanderbilt usually gets, but none of those guys saw the field in any meaningful situations. Some of them barely played at all. I think they all took a red shirt. So I just don't know. That seems like that defensive line is the same way. I'm trying to think how often a defensive back has come to Vanderbilt and throw out some of just the awful, awful teams that maybe Watson Brown fielded at times, or Rod Dowhauer, or some of Woody's bad teams, or some of Bobby Johnson's really bad teams. I'm just trying to think how often a defensive back has come in and made a big impact his freshman year. I mean, I go back, and even Juwan Williams, who was picked middle of the second round by the Patriots, was second team All-SEC last year. As a freshman, his time started coming late in the year, and it was a reserve. So I just don't know. Safety may be different.
Yeah.
I just wonder how realistic it is to expect a freshman, unless it's a kid like an Alabama or someone like that gets, which, let's face it, is not on this roster, how realistic it is for that guy to make an impact. Because Juwan Williams was, borderline top 100 recruit, and even he didn't do it. Although, again, that's corner and not safety.
But your point is extremely valid, and what we have to fight against is because, look, and that's the case, what we got to fight against is when you have players that had the offers that our guys had in the last class, and with the higher rankings comes up, maybe fairly or not, an expectation of immediate return. That's just not always the case. I mean, yeah, it happens, but it's not the norm. And what we have to fight against is that because this was such a successful signing class, that we don't start labeling them bust because they didn't come in and make an immediate impact in the secondary when we could have used it.
Well, historically at Vanderbilt, most of the time it takes somebody the end of that second, third year to make an impact unless they're just really a stud. And that's pretty much across the board.
Yeah, I mean, the DJ Moores of the world don't grow on trees. They just don't.
Well, even Jordan Matthews. And then, Jordan Matthews is the all-time leading receiver in the SEC. He didn't see the field much till the end of his freshman year.
But Chris, I mean, I think that you would agree, and I think this entire fan base would agree. Wasn't his fault. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't because he wasn't ready. They wouldn't give him the opportunity because every time he came in the stinking game, he balled out.
No, and that's back to coaching stubbornness. Coaches, and I think you see it with this staff too. And that's another thing I'm interested to watch is kind of the loyalty to their guys. Like, I think Kari Blasingame was one of Derek Mason's guys. And look, I'm not saying that judgmentally. Kari, from everything I hear, is just a tremendous human being and like the kind of guy you would want your daughter to date and all those things. But I think sometimes I wonder if coaches, and Derek is hardly the last guy to do this, if they don't go with their guys until it's beyond obvious that maybe a guy behind them deserves to play more. You saw it with Vaughn last year. Hard to know how much injuries factored into that. I think you saw it at kick returner. I think Jamari Wakefield has kind of become one of his guys who bide at his times. They had several more explosive options they could have used at returner, but they stuck with Jamari. So I don't know, that's kind of the other thing, and I'll tell you specifically why I'm watching is Chris Pierce, because I think that they feel Pierce is one of their starting receivers. That sounded like the talk. I think that's the depth chart they gave me. I kind of edited mine a little bit because I just see Pierce as their sixth receiver. But that's what coaches tend to do. And look, in a way, you realize and respect that there is an impact beyond what is going on right now, that it sends a message and creates a culture, and that transcends just what is happening on the field. But there's a point at which I think it impacts your performance, and that is kind of the other thing I'm watching is how much does he go with his guys at the expense of guys who are behind them, who I think are more talented. Now, the other part of that is, too, there are things that you don't see in terms of learning plays and things like that and being trusted with blocking assignments. I understand that, but that is the other thing, and boy, did it come into play with Jordan Matthews, to circle back to where we started.
Yeah. I still get frustrated about that. I never understood that. Some of those amazing fourth quarter games that he'd have, and we'd be thinking to ourselves, Chris, why even bother at this point? Either start him or just leave him out, man. Just the craziest thing. I never really understood that. But, one more thing I want to say, we're probably need to start heading towards the mailbag. And it's about the defensive line. Chris, the very first game they play, they're playing arguably the best offensive line in America.
Yeah.
Would you say that's a fair statement? Because I do. I think that.
I mean, that's how they're regarded. And one more thing before we go to the mailbag too is we didn't get the defensive back. I mean, I think Dante Carrier-Williams locks down one corner spot. I think that Daly will start at safety. So that's probably four guys on defense that I think are probably going to start at certain spots. And I think that Coppett will probably start at the other safety spot, but who knows if Max Worship has come on or Jerkins. I think on the defensive line, Birchmeier will probably start, but I haven't seen those grad transfers. But again, just so many questions at that position group too. And honestly, as I talk through this, again, they have options, and I like that. But just in terms of the way they start their schedule, it just does not leave me feeling any better about the defense from my vantage point, which could be disconnected from reality. I mean, maybe when I get out there and I get to see guys, I will feel a little differently. But just based on what we have been allowed to see and what I know, I don't see this defense taking the step up that a lot of people are optimistic that it will.
One player that I don't think we've mentioned in months, and, when he got here, he certainly looked the part physically, and he flashed, when he first got here. Of course, hadn't really done anything much since, but what about Stone Edwards? Is there a chance maybe Stone Edwards, he's a big physical kid, is there any chance that he takes that step and starts contributing a little bit this year?
A year ago, I would have put him as a pretty good bet to do that. I think that he has either fallen off or been passed or both. I think that's where the transfers in Turner and Maddox have a chance to jump him. I think Davion Davis, adding him, that's another one that is a kid I want to watch who could probably help them some this year. That's another one I don't and to be honest, that's kind of a good sign because Edwards is one of these kids that physically looks like other defensive linemen in this league, which a lot of times they don't have more than one of those two guys. So to me, that's kind of a sign. I know people have been more positive on the defensive line, and of course, not to mention Derek Green and Malik Langham, who probably don't play this year, but that's two more dudes that were wanted by major programs. I think that that's an encouraging development. I still think. And again, I'll go back to what I'm saying. I'm really interested to see this difference a year from now because this, to me, just profiles is a bunch that takes a big step up from 19 to 20 just because kids get experience and get bigger and stronger. And the transfer situation, I think this time a year from now, I think our tune on the defense might be a lot different, but at this point in time, I just think there's just a ton of questions, and I think it's wise to be what's the word I'm trying to say? I think it's wise to be cautious with your optimism for right now.
Yeah, and I certainly understand that. I do want to say one more thing. One player, look, that is not going to play this year, but man. From just a physical standpoint, boy, I hope if Donald Fitzgerald truly figures out the game of football, have you ever seen a frame like that, man?
Oh, I assume you're referring to the pictures that Vanderbilt posted this week. Yeah, that kid's massive.
I haven't seen that, but yeah, he's God, he's a walking eclipse, Chris, and a big frame, man. If he learns the game, gets more experience, man, look out. Good grief, that dude's big.
You ready for the mailbag?
Well, yeah.
It's not a ringing endorsement there, but we'll go with it.
I'm ready, son.
Today's mailbag is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. You need an insurance agent who wants to know your unique needs and circumstances and will tailor an insurance plan to fit them. Josh is your guy. Call him 615-933-1979. You can also contact him, Josh at hqinsurance.com or facebook.com/JD Minton. He's my agent. Give him a shot. I think you'll be pleased. And also, don't forget, Josh is involved with Camp Horizon, which is a camp for kids with cancer. So contact Josh, see how you can be a sponsor for that event. Woody VU66 asks, what position is your biggest area of concern? Is there talent at that position so that hopefully through the course of the season it gets better?
First of all, appreciate the question, and I think that's something that we covered earlier, Chris. I mean, just for me, I have to go offensive line. Like I said, we can't get to the 2 deep because we can't finish the 1 deep. And moreover, even if we do know the names, we're not even really sure exactly where they're playing, other than the left side of the offensive line, and that concerns you. It has to. I mean, there's no team that wouldn't be concerned by that. Doesn't mean this team can't be good, but that's not really one of the places that you want to have question marks.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you on that. Ann Arbor says, I haven't heard much about special teams. What do both of you think?
Man, I'll say this. I like the potential that our return game flashes, and having a guy like Justice Sheldon Mosley, who's got I get that it's the Ivy League, but he's a guy who's proven he can get to the house. It's good to have that type of experience on special teams, but when it comes to field goals and punting the football, Chris, I don't know. We haven't really addressed it all that much. Hopefully, we won't have to do too much punting, but I mean, I'm not really sure, Chris. I think this could be an area of concern, especially field goals.
Punting is a complete mystery. I just don't know how I can assess that till I see camp. I didn't see a ton of it in the spring. Harrison Smith's a kid at Brentwood Academy who was really good in high school. I thought he was better in high school than he was when I saw him in fall and spring camp. But who knows? That has a chance to change. Sometimes punters take a year or two. The kicking game, I don't know. I don't feel super optimistic. Riley Gay's got to start hitting more kicks than he did a year ago. I don't know if he'll get pushed in the fall or in August, but yeah, that's the kicking aspect of it is a mystery to me a bit.
In some games, because there's a couple of games, let's face it, Chris, and you know what I'm speaking about, the Ole Miss, Kentucky, Tennessees, Missouris of the world that could come down to the kicking game. Be real upset if it comes down to it, and that's what keeps us from getting over the hump in some of those games.
Yeah, I think a lot of people share that sentiment. I think that's one thing that I'm starting to see more concern about on our board.
It's the last to be addressed, but my goodness, if it's an issue, man, there's not much more miserable.
By the way, the intention is not to depress the fans. That we have basically skipped over the things that we're sure about, which is that they're going to run the football really well with Vaughn, that their receivers are dynamic and make some plays. And I still feel good about quarterback play, whoever wins that. But this is kind of more on the question marks today. Just in case people have listened to this episode and not heard other ones, we have been plenty bullish on some other areas. Okay, MacFled says, just for fun, say this team pulls off a modern miracle, wins its first 3 games. What would the national ranking be, and how much national media talk about Keyshawn Vaughn for Heisman would there be?
Well, if they win their first 3 games, That's including a top 5 win, another top 10 win, and a win on the road against a team who beat Ohio State by 29 last year. If that doesn't land me into the top 10, then I'm going to stop playing college football. I'm going to say you win those 3 games, you deserve a seat at the table. I'm going to say squarely at number 10.
Oh, I think they're inside the top 10 and maybe knocking on the door of the top 5. Probably not quite there, but yeah, I think so. I mean, how I don't care who, like you said, I don't care who you are. If they beat those 3 teams, yeah, they're in the top 10.
Well, I know that you don't care who they are, and I don't care who they are, but I mean, I'm going to have to see it first. I mean, we're not a respected program. Even when we were winning 9 games a year, Chris, yeah, we were winning 9 games, but what was the talk? Well, Georgia and Florida and Tennessee, they're really just not that good right now. And yeah, you got the win at Auburn, but these teams they're a step back. It's not that y'all are great, that these teams are a step back. Y'all are a nice team. And then we got as high as what was it 14, Chris? Was that what it was?
In the year that Bobby went to the bowl game was 07? Yeah. Is that the year you're discussing?
When
they went 5-0?
Auburn by 1.
Yeah, they got to 13 or 14. Now, they weren't exactly winning those games in dominating fashion either.
Chris, you may be right. And look, it's pure speculation for either one of us. The best I could go, I'm nothing if I'm not flexible. The best I could go is 8. I'll give you 8. I won't go anymore.
Week 4 is about when teams that are undefeated, if they're Power 5, even if they're not beating anybody, start to either sneak in the top 25 or get major traction just outside. I mean, it's right. Surprising that at that point, how many times teams have lost a game, and that's where things start to, I think by that point, 3 weeks in, you beat those 3 teams, that gets people's attention. Now, the likelihood of it happening, I think, is next to none, but that would be very interesting. And I think Keyshawn Vaughn, I would have to think if they win those 3 games, he would be squarely in the Heisman talk, because I would have to think he had a lot to do with that.
Well, I think he would, but remember, this is going to be one of the more interesting Heisman races ever. I mean, think about this, Chris. You've got Justin Herbert, you've got Trevor Lawrence, you've got Jalen Hurts, you've got Jeff Fromm, you've got Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, it's going to be real hard for a running back to win it this year. Real hard. I don't care what they do.
Knoxville Door says, what are your favorite football stadiums to see a game in?
Ooh, there's a fun question. Boy, I'm going to give you an answer that's going to surprise you, Chris. I think it's going to surprise you, but I have always enjoyed my trips there for multiple reasons. I mean, there are bigger stadiums, they're more extravagant, but I probably have my favorite time at Ole Miss.
I've been there. I've liked that one. I've liked Georgia. Probably like Georgia better. I went to Kentucky pre-renovation. I was in Alabama. That's been a while. I don't have one that stands out. Maybe Georgia.
I have not been to Georgia, so I can't tell you as far as that goes. But the ones I've been to, I'd have to say probably Ole Miss.
South Florida VU says, if the current SEC football coaches, who would you guys most want to play for? And asks us for our top 2 or 3.
The current SEC head football coaches that I would like to play for. Do I get to count Derek Mason?
Sure. He's in the SEC.
Yeah. I'll name 3. One of them would be Derek Mason. That dude seems to love his players, and they seem to love him too. I just like the guy's vibe, man. I would definitely play for him. Let's see. I've always been intrigued by Dan Mullen, Chris. I think Dan would probably have to be one of them. And let's see the other one. I shudder to say this. I'm going to say this, and I'm going to get mocked, and you're going to laugh at me, and I'm a piece of trash and all this other stuff. But I would find it very interesting to play for Coach O.
Yeah. A lot of people like him.
You know?
I don't know that I'm on that, but I think the people that know him, a lot of them seem to like him. So,
what about you? If you had to boil it down to three?
Well, I struggle with what to do with Nick Saban because I think he'd make me better, but he might also drive me crazy. The obsession with everything down there and just how tightly wound he is. You hear Alabama players say stuff like, they appreciate the experience, but they kind of had enough of the system and they kind of laugh about it. So that's the one that I don't know what to do with. Guys that are kind of obvious to me, I like Barry Odom. I just hear good stuff about him. I feel like he's a trustworthy dude. I don't like Dan Mullen at all from what I hear. I was surprised that he was on your list. Maybe Will Muschamp, that one I'm on the fence about. And I think Mason, just from what I have been told by parents of players who played for him, it's really positive on the whole. Everybody likes him. I think they feel like he's pretty honest, that he cares about their kids. So those, I don't know what order I'd put them in or really how to sort them out, but those are the ones that come to mind.
Okay. I can ride with every one of those. Now, I might trade out Dan Mullen for Matt Luke.
Yeah, I would too. I just don't care for Mullen. Everybody that I've ever talked to that has dealt with him kind of feels the same way too.
He gets results though, brother.
He does win. He
gets results. The one I don't know, I don't really know enough about him as a head coach. I know about him, but as far as just the experience of him at the head coach position would be Coach Moorhead. I'm not really sure about him to be able to speak on that one.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I think Matt Luke is really well liked too. I don't know what kind of coach he is, but yeah, those are mine. I don't know Morrison, Arkansas. I have no feel. Malzahn is just so introverted and kind of to himself. I don't know. I don't really hear good or bad. Yeah. I don't know that I have an opinion on Stoops. Pruitt I could take or leave. And I just Kirby Smart seems like a miserable dude, but some people like him, so I don't know.
Yeah, Jimbo Fisher.
And I don't care for Jimbo either. I'm anyway.
So I like my answers. I'm going to stick with them.
Last one, if you could add one former Vanderbilt football player. Sure.
Just before you go to that last one, let's do one each of outside of the conference.
Okay, boy, I'll have to think. You go first.
I don't. Oh, mine's easy.
Okay.
Mine's easy, man. I would love, the dude gets it. I'd play for Dabo, man. I'd love to play for Dabo.
Yeah. I think that would be my I think that would be my one overall.
Yeah, easily. It would be him, and I wouldn't have to think twice about it.
I think outside the Power Five, and this is just totally based on my nephew's experience, but Craig Bowl at Wyoming. I know that my family, my brother and sister-in-law and their dealings with him, and my nephew and their dealings with him have really come away impressed. So there's your very biased outside the Power Five answer.
Well, hey, I don't hate that. I'm not real. I know who he is. I'm not familiar with him as far as interactions. But I'll tell you what. Another guy that if we're going to go outside of the Power Five is Coach Norvell at Memphis.
Yeah, I just don't know much about him.
I know the players here love him. I say here, one absolutely love the dude. He plays an exciting brand of football. So. Because remember, everybody thought it was over with when they lost Fuente. That was it. They were done. They're better. They're better.
Okay, last question. If you could add one former Vanderbilt football player to the current team, who would it be and why?
I think this might be the easiest question that I have ever been asked in my entire life. You have yours ready?
I think I do with an honorable mention or 2 or 3.
There's no honorable mentions for me. I know exactly who it is, and exactly, I'm, don't get me wrong. There's a couple offensive linemen I wouldn't mind having right now, but you can keep everybody and give me number 41.
Yeah, that was my first one too, Zach Cunningham. Although you could argue Jamie Winborn, Jamie Duncan, I'd probably take Zach. And Will Walford might be my other one. Like if you could move him in, let him play left tackle, you could slide Cochran back to right, and then inside the situation solidifies a good bit. Jay Cutler would be my other one just because he's Jay Cutler. Not that I think that their quarterback situation is bad, but he was just so talented. I mean, can you imagine having to deal with Cutler and those receivers and Keyshawn Vaughn?
Well, it would either, I know, that would be unbelievable. Mine would have to be, Chris, as we wrap this up, if it wasn't Zach Cunningham, I would probably have to go with Libner Tulaska.
Well, that was right on my list. I won't say where, but
oh man, yeah, I'm sure. So yeah, definitely Zach for me, no doubt.
Either that, or let's think like if you could grab another corner, Corey Chavis would fit pretty nicely on that team. Yeah, that he's up there too.
DJ Moore.
DJ Moore is another one. Although a lot of DJ's value was in the utility stuff, and I think that they have the stuff that DJ could do in those areas. I think they've got that covered on this team. Like DJ's, a lot of that was in returner and two-way value. Well, I don't think DJ Moore would see the field for this team in those roles. So I'm thinking just a pure corner who can cover would be high priority too.
Little Fred Vincent action for you?
Yeah, one of those two, either one would make this team a lot better.
There's no question about it.
Well, my friend, you have made our show better. Thanks for coming on today. Tell people where they can find you on Twitter and where they can hear your show online.
Well, Chris, you can't imagine what that means to me, man. You can find me on Twitter at CheapSeatsBass, online at WNWS.com, and you can listen to the show at 101.5, 6 to 8 p.m. in Jackson, Tennessee.
Thank you, my friend.
Man, yeah, thank you, brother, and anchor down.
He is Seabass. I'm Chris Lee, host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back with more of these. May have one more this week. If not, we will be back with you next week.